what's bad about the FlyQuest roster for the 2020 season is not that it's a terrible roster, but the fact that it's just straight up the least hyped roster despite being decent on paper. And it's not that they're bad, but it's also not that they're good as well. I mean, just looking at their entire roster, of course, Viper in the top lane, Santorin in jungle, you have Power of Evil in mid lane, and you have the bot lane of Wild Turtle and Ignar. And now when you look at this lineup, you're just like, well, who's the real firepower for this team, right? Like what's supposed to be going on for this team? So I'll start with the top lane, which is probably the most obvious, at least when it comes to the last time we saw this FlyQuest roster, right? And this was the most hyped area for the actual team, right? It was Viper in the top lane, and yet what I have reservations of is he's still yet to prove himself as he's coming in after his rookie year, right? And so whenever I look at a rookie, I say this time and time again, is that after the rookie year is fine, and usually if the scouter does their due diligence, is that they'll bring in a rookie when he'll do good within a particular meta, right? So that is generally when a rookie is even brought in or scouted, regardless, right? Is that the current meta suits them, or the meta that's kind of shaping towards that, I guess you could say, is going to be good for that person. So that's the time to grab that guy now, to where he doesn't have to worry necessarily about his champion pool, or maybe his mechanics, or even small parts of his macro, right? It's that you can teach all the other things that have to do with professional play, which is a lot of stuff, right? There's a lot of other things other than those things, particularly in which you have to teach a new player. So it's best to bring in a rookie when those things are most in his favor, and then to work on his fundamentals a little bit more, and just work on these other different areas in which he isn't familiar with because he hasn't played in professional play. So with Viper, I have a fear. Okay, first, FlyQuest realized that they couldn't make Karma work for the top lane in as a flex pick. I think it was week 7 where we saw Viper try and play Karma top, didn't fucking work, and it was in a game where they just weren't proactive at all, and they just didn't get anything rolling. And so I'm worried that Viper's, I guess, adaptability is a little bit limited too, right? I mean, we saw the Aurelia flex pick work once, but it still shows that, okay, Viper, he's not very good on Aurelia, or he hasn't shown a propensity towards that champion, which was very meta at the time, by the way. And then you just see that flex picks are more and more common, and as I said in a previous video, that I think flex picks are an actual fundamental key towards greatness. I'll probably link that. And it's more and more true as League of Legends grows as a game, right? There will be more and more champions, because Riot just can't handle them all, right? It's a lot of champions to balance, 35 plus that they have to balance, and some of them are going to be flexible. So that creates a drastic advantage when it comes to drafts, because a lot of these professional players are at a similar level. Some of them, obviously way above the average professional player, but those are the outliers, right? Those are the fakers. But generally, a player, they don't really gain an advantage unless they have the actual tools to gain an advantage, which is, of course, a counter pick. And so that's where flex picks come in handy. So then you can work your way towards a counter pick towards the later parts of the draft. So what I'm saying is flex picks are great, and Viper hasn't shown the ability to really do that to a high degree. And I know it's harsh to judge a rookie on that, so I'm not going to judge him fully on that, because we have an entire offseason for this guy to figure out flex picks and for this guy to expand his champion pool. So I'm not going to say that this is the end-all be-all for Viper, but it is still something to keep in mind as we go into the spring split, and to see if he's rectified this problem at all. And I assume that he will. I assume that he will have people around him, or maybe the conscientiousness to work on that area and to where he can tackle this kind of deeper champion pool. Because I mean, after all, he was like a one-trick Riven player, right? Which we all know Riven players, usually they only fucking play Riven. So anyways, moving on to Santorin in the jungle. This guy's a beast, and I've always thought that Santorin was a beast. Well, maybe not in TSM necessarily, but after that, I've always thought Santorin was pretty fucking good. And so coming into this FlyQuest roster, I actually think he's probably one of the better junglers and underrated junglers when it comes to, I guess, maybe public opinion. I don't think that teams necessarily underrate Santorin. I think he's probably up there, behind maybe Svenskeren and Xmithy, obviously. So behind those two, I think he comes in at a good, fourth or maybe third to some people, right? Meteos is obviously up there too. But he is this jungler that is pretty cerebral in his own right. And I don't say that word lightly for junglers, because I think it requires a specific talent. And in terms of my definition of cerebral, I think it's an idea or a propensity to judge the map and determine which place to play towards, irregardless of what place that you should play towards, right? Or as analysts say that, you should be playing towards this side because it's supposed to be your top or your strong side, or that side is your weak side. But it all is very dynamic, so it changes within the game, and you can never know. And that's the value of a good jungler, is they're able to actually determine which is actually their strong side and which is actually their weak side, right? And then also to determine the moves that are available for the enemy jungler, right? So Santorin in that sense is a pretty big beast. I wouldn't say he's necessarily the best at tracking another jungler, but he's pretty decent at it. So going off of Santorin's strengths, I think he's able to play off of Viper's aggression quite well. I mean, we saw that right when Viper got onto the FlyQuest roster. They were playing a little bit more towards him, and he was able to do and carry and the top lane, right? And this may be because, first of all, as a newer player, you also have the advantage, and a lot of people don't realize this aspect of a new player, and this is probably one of their only advantages that they have when they're a new player, is that you have no idea what the fuck this guy's gonna do, right? You have a little bit of an idea, right? If your scouts did their research, or maybe if you played solo queue against him a little bit, is that his champion pool to a certain extent, right? He's a Viper's like a one-trick Riven or whatever. But at the same time, you don't really necessarily know what he's going to do in a professional setting either, because if you do your job right as a coach, then you're able to mold this guy into a different mode of thinking, right? Away from his solo queue tendencies. And then it becomes a crapshoot for the top laner to react against this new rookie. So I think Santorin was able to play off of Viper's aggression quite well in the very beginning, and I think that benefited FlyQuest team. So hopefully he can do that again. I'm not sure, because it kind of tailed off towards the end when we got into the summer split in the later weeks. And then, of course, you have the idea that Santorin, he's usually in the right spot at the right time. Yeah, not at the level of, what is pretty much legendary of Xmithy. I think that's his best quality, is actually being at the correct place at the right time and reading the enemy jungler. But generally, Santorin is pretty fucking good at that. So Santorin, he doesn't have a whole lot of holes to patch up in this ship. I don't think it's a ship that would necessarily drown, but there's nothing to say that they're going to come over a gigantic swell if it happens. So Santorin is still a decent jungler, maybe something a little bit more aggressive you would want in this FlyQuest roster, but I don't have generally a big problem with it. Because, I mean, Santorin, he still plays the supportive junglers like Sejuani, but he's also shown some pretty aggro picks like Kha'Zix or, Lee Sin, of course, which he's pretty famous for. So Santorin is able to carry, but I think in this particular roster, he needs to play a supportive type just due to the players, in his team. Of course, you have Viper in the top lane who's pretty aggressive, and then you have Wild Turtle in the bot lane who's also aggressive. So, generally you want two very aggressive people within a team. I think that should be the core fundamental of how you should build a League of Legends team. Is you should have two people that are quite aggressive. And at bare minimum, you should have one, and luckily FlyQuest do. But ideally, you want two. 3 is a little bit too much because then shit just starts going crazy. People start going for plays that they shouldn't because another person is most likely going to be going for an aggressive play at the same time as this other person is on the other side of the map or what have you, or even close to that side. So it's just a good idea as a general formula to do that. So I think Santorin's a pretty good jungler for this team, but I would still like to see a little bit more aggression from it because I don't have a lot of faith in Viper, to be honest. So moving on to the mid lane, Power of Evil. He's a decent choice. This guy puts out pretty good numbers. He does his job in the mid lane. He never really loses the mid lane matchup. And the biggest thing, or the biggest criticism that I have for Power of Evil is that he's kind of I'm afraid he'll sacrifice too much because of his just champion flexibility. And now that might be saying that I'm hating on one of his big strengths. And to some degree, I think that's true. I am kind of hating on a strength of a player, but I think also strengths can be weaknesses given the context of maybe the surrounding team or the circumstance that this player is put in. So with his flexibility, the reason why I'm not too high on Power of Evil's playstyle is because with his champion flexibility, he often gives his other teammates prio picks, right? He gives them picks that are OP or considered OP within the meta, and yet he himself doesn't get the OP pick because he's like, hey, don't worry guys, I can play anything. Literally anything I have a matchup for, so don't worry about me. Problem is that lowers his kind of responsibility, and I have this inkling that Power of Evil has kind of forgotten the idea of what it means to actually be a true carry, or to kind of bear the weight of a responsibility of having this OP pick and then having to perform on that pick. And so in this team, I don't see any other place in which there could be a massive priority pick that a player could play to a high level and kind of demand that. And I don't think Wild Turtle's going to demand that, and I don't think Viper has the champion pool to demand that. I don't know, maybe he does. But it comes to a point to where you actually need to take the reins and you need to demand the OP pick. And so that's something that I'd like to see for Power of Evil this season, but I actually don't think we'll see it. I think he'll just stick in the same ways, and that's kind of why I have a problem with him within this lineup. Now, obviously, he's capable of flex picks when he wants to, right? But, or if he wants to, and if he wants to learn these flex picks, right? We saw the Kiana from him, so like that's something that is obviously in his wheelhouse. So, and this guy is known for picking up champions at a particularly fast rate. So I don't see that as a problem, but for Viper, I think that is, right? When you have a champion pool that's supposed to be shared between the top lane and the mid lane, then you kind of have a problem if one of those players is a rookie, right? So it becomes this issue of, okay, well, should Power of Evil even practice these picks that are supposed to be flex picks, and yet Viper can't keep up because his just ability to learn new champions is at a slower rate, which may very well be true. People have different capabilities of learning a new skill or a new task at a different rate, and we all know that Power of Evils is at a very high rate. So I wouldn't fault that, but I'm saying that I think their ability to have flex picks within this team seems to be somewhat limited at first sight, unless Viper does some serious fucking work in this offseason. So, moving on to the bot lane. I think in bot lane, initially just seems like a mismatch and almost a repeat of 2018, right? When they brought Wadid in to be the support for Wild Turtle. And so you can see how bad that performed. And I'm not saying, okay, well, they're both Korean and they're both support players. That means they're the same people and they both came from Europe. Like, no, not necessarily. But I do see this kind of idea that Wild Turtle's playstyle is pretty unique in order to unlock him to the full level of that. He's very aggressive. And so in order to unlock him fully and to see that he's going to go for a play that maybe you don't understand, I remember doing an interview with JJ. I think it was during the summer split, I want to say. Or maybe it was the spring split. Yeah, it was probably the spring split because that was when he was playing the most. Was that Wild Turtle will see a play that the rest of the team doesn't see, or maybe that JJ doesn't see, and he'll go for that, and that'll be like a misjudge either by him or at the fault of JJ himself, right? And so there will be this kind of disconjointed correlation that Wild Turtle has with the rest of his team. And so that's something really hard to go off of as a support player, right? You're supposed to be kind of symbiotic, almost telepathic in a sense when you work with a support player. You have to understand their nuances and their different micro steps in order to fully take advantage of what your synergy is supposed to be. And so with Wild Turtle, it just seems like it's going to be another mismatch again. And I would like to see someone who is more of a veteran and more of someone who has worked with more experienced ADC players in order to understand, okay, I have these couple different reference points of these different ADC players that some are good, some are bad. And then I kind of put that onto Wild Turtle and then judge from that algorithm, okay, this is who Wild Turtle is and this is his play style. This is what I'm going to expect. So I just think overall, Wild Turtle's actually a really hard support to play with in an odd sense. But I think Wild Turtle is sneakily I bring up sneaky, I guess, and Wild Turtle. Probably fucking hurt some feelings there. So, but anyways, Wild Turtle is like a very, I guess, hidden in the necessary component of this team, right? He's like the cog behind the other cogs that you don't actually see, but turns the entire fucking engine, right? And so he's this crazy fucking player that you need on this team because you look at all the other pieces that you have, there isn't really anyone that's going to go for the ridiculous play, right? You have Viper that might do that, but he also has more of a, I guess, percentage to fuck up, right? Because he's the rookie and he wasn't really playing that well in the summer split either. So you have this wild card, I guess, this fucking Charlie down in the bot lane, and it's like, okay, well, don't fucking misconstrue that for him being fucking Asian. But anyways, you have this guy down in the bot lane that obviously has a crazy play style. So, and I think you need that on the team. You need someone to be a little bit ballsy, and Wild Turtle is exactly the ADC that you want, but I just don't think the pairing of the support is necessarily something that can be handled, right? So overall, I think the entire play style of this team is, I'm worried about the voice of the entire team itself. I think there isn't a really strong, demanding voice of the team. I know that Wild Turtle talks a lot. I know that Santorin is as vocal as he needs to be. And I know that the Power of Evil is, somewhat vocal as well too. But I just worry that there's no general direction. There's no power source, I guess. Maybe the power supply isn't strong enough to run the fucking video card and the CPU. You know what I mean? So I think that's a problem with this team. I also think that they're just generally lacking firepower, or at least There's no taking up ownership to carry because, like I said, there's a general capability for Power of Evil to carry, and I would love to see him do that. And if there's any goal for FlyQuest, I think that should be the fucking goal, is to make Power of Evil confident enough to put on the carry pants. I think that's what they need to do in order to make this team actually rise above expectations. But most importantly, man, this is the most vanilla fucking team in terms of personality. I mean, you have no one who's really any least bit spicy at all. Like, you just have nothing to really work. I know the FlyQuest brand is supposed to be the nice guys of the league or whatever the fuck, but it didn't really work out for them in popularity for last year, so I don't know why that would work out for them this year. And then on top of that, it's no real big move that they did. There's no power move that they made in terms of their roster and their firepower. So this just seems like I would say FlyQuest is actually the forgotten team. I'd give them that nickname. They're the forgotten team. It's like, yeah, they're not at the bottom, and the bottom has eyes on them too because they're so fucking bad. They're not at the top. They're not Team Liquid, right? Who, obviously has eyes on them for a reason. And they're not necessarily in contention to even challenge the top teams. So it becomes this dilemma to where it appears that they are in fact the most vanilla, right? You don't remember them because they're in the middle of the fucking pack and they don't do anything meaningful and they didn't make any meaningful roster changes. So I'm really unexcited, to be honest, for this team. I hope they prove me wrong, and I hope especially Power of Evil proves me wrong, and I would love to see Power of Evil pop off coming into the spring split. So let's look out for that, and let's look out to see if FlyQuest can actually break off into the upper ranks of maybe 4th or even 5th, in determination, and see if they can actually pull it out. So